Scott Walker has been testing the waters for a presidential run all year, but he took the next step toward an official bid for the White House last week by forming an official Testing the Waters committee. That will allow him to raise even more money for a presidential campaign. The Republican field grew again last week with the entrance of former Florida Governor Jeb Bush and billionaire businessman Donald Trump. We're sizing up the state of the race with ABC political director Rick Klein, who joins us now from Washington. Rick, it's good to have you back on the program. I think a few months ago when Jeb Bush was talking about running, people assumed he might be the clear favorite in this race. But as we begin to get serious about this, is he any better off, actually, than a guy like Scott Walker at this stage?
The first 6 months of this year have been a big disappointment for Jeb Bush. The plan was to clear the field. Shock and awe, they said. He would even scare other candidates out of the race. He would be the clear frontrunner with all the money, all the mojo, all the momentum. He does have money, but he doesn't have anything else right now going for him. He is back in the pack. I think you'd still consider him in the first rank of contenders, but you cannot call him a frontrunner, not by any objective standard. National polls show essentially a 6 or 7 way tie for first, and at state level polls, he is not leading in Iowa. He's going to have a hard slog there. New Hampshire maybe a little bit better, but Jeb Bush is not the frontrunner in this field.
And where does Scott Walker stand right now, based on your conversations with people in the know?
I think if you were going to name a frontrunner, and it's tough to do it in this field, you would name Scott Walker. The reason, in national polls, he's part of that tie. He is in the mix among the others in the low single digits typically in national polls. And in the state polling, he is pulled slightly away from the pack in Iowa. There is something real about the appeal of Scott Walker. I was in Iowa earlier in the week traveling around with Jeb Bush, and people still talk about Scott Walker. They remember the performance that he gave earlier in the year at sort of the kickoff event in January. And beyond that, they know the biography. They know the key data points. They know, some of them even know about him shopping at Kohl's, but they definitely know that he won 3 elections inside of 4 years. They know that he took on the unions and won. Those are real deliverable results that conservative activists are excited about. So he's going to have to work hard. He's going to have to hold on to a lead in a very crowded field. But when and if he gets into the race, and I think it is just a question of when right now, he is going to be a formidable candidate.
Does it make any difference, Rick, that he is not officially a candidate right now? He's certainly behaving like one, but you have other candidates who've already officially announced their candidacies.
It hasn't seemed to hurt him, interestingly. I think that whether that's a good strategy or not is always an open question. What would have done this or should have done this in terms of the time frame. But this has worked for Scott Walker. He's been able to go out and raise money in a pretty aggressive, substantial way. He's appeared at the major national events where you have multiple candidates on the same stage at the same time. He has made his trips, his requisite number of trips to the early voting states, even though he hasn't declared his candidacy. So I don't know how they could have scripted this any better in the run-up to an expected, all but certain announcement. For him to be standing in the mix among national leaders at the top of the list in Iowa, even without being a declared candidate, that's a pretty good first half of the year.
So Donald Trump gets into the race, and in an interview with Bloomberg in this last week, he's somewhat critical of Governor Walker. He said that there are tremendous problems in Wisconsin, although he didn't really specifically identify a number of those. But is Donald Trump just an irritant for a guy like Scott Walker, or do you pay serious attention to what he says?
He is a sideshow, but he's a sideshow who could easily at any point invade the main stage. What he says about the other candidates will get read back to those other candidates. It will bait them on. Almost certainly, he will be among the 10 participants of that first Republican debate in early August. So he is going to be a factor. And there's, frankly, a group of people, because of his celebrity, because of the fact that they just hate Washington as much as he does and hate all politicians of any stripe, who are going to be attracted to his candidacy. And so I don't think he'll be a serious threat for the nomination, but I do think he'll be a serious threat for the potential nominees in terms of driving them in positions they don't want to go, entangling them in kind of daily little firefights against someone who is essentially a reality show with many billions of dollars to back him up, but someone who is ultimately not going to be the Republican nominee. So I do think he's a force to be reckoned with, and Scott Walker, among others, is going to have to pay attention to what Donald Trump is doing.
Rick Klein is ABC News political director. It's great to have you back on the program, Rick. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Mike.
And our editorial partner, WisPolitics.com, says Governor Walker is looking at a July 13th announcement of his bid for the White House. You can stay on top of all of the developments in Walker's 2016 bid by following the Walker Watch blog at WisPolitics.com. Coming up next, what makes winning elections look easy?